You're walking into a stranger's home. It's somewhere cold, somewhere old, somewhere long before borders and passports and the awkward question of whether to go for a handshake or a hug. There's wood smoke in the air, and animal hide, and the damp of stone walls that have never once been warm. The door opens. A person steps forward to greet you, and instead of reaching out a hand, instead of bowing, instead of waving, they lean in close, press their nose gently against your cheek, and they inhale. Slowly, deliberately, they are smelling you. And here's the part that should unsettle you a little. You don't pull away. Because in this place, at this time, this is exactly what's supposed to happen. This is hello. Now your modern brain is screaming. Because you've been trained your whole life to think of smelling a person as something deeply, almost criminally intimate. You smell your partner. You smell a newborn baby. You smell that one sweater. You do not, under any circumstances, smell the delivery driver. But for a huge chunk of human history, across a huge chunk of the planet, smelling another person was not weird at all. It was polite. It was warm. It was the original handshake. So here's the question that this whole video is built around. Why did ancient humans greet each other by smelling? Why was sticking your nose into someone's face a sign of respect and affection instead of a reason to call security? And here's the thing nobody tells you. The answer isn't some quirky cultural accident. It's not just different strokes for different folks. The smell greeting might be one of the oldest, most biologically honest forms of human communication that exists. It might predate language. It might predate the handshake by tens of thousands of years. And the reason it faded is, frankly, more disturbing than the reason it existed. Because if you go back far enough, smelling each other wasn't a custom. It was survival. And every single one of your ancestors did it. If even one of them had refused, had turned their nose up at the nose, you might not be here. This goes deep. Let's go. Let's start with biology. Because before this was a greeting, it was a sense. And smell is, without exaggeration, the oldest sense we have. Long before life had eyes, before anything could hear a sound, single-celled organisms were already detecting chemicals in the water around them, drifting toward food, drifting away from danger. That's chemoreception, and it is the ancestral grandparent of every nose that has ever existed. Sight is new. Hearing is new. Smell is primordial. And here's the architectural detail that makes smell special. The thing that explains everything else in this video. When you see something, the signal takes a scenic route. It goes through a relay station in the middle of your brain called the thalamus before it gets passed along to be consciously processed. Same with sound. Same with touch. Smell does not. Smell is the only one of your senses that skips the line. Olfactory signals go almost directly into the limbic system, the part of your brain that handles emotion and memory. The amygdala, the hippocampus, the ancient core. That's why a smell can ambush you. You catch one whiff of a perfume, or sunscreen, or a specific kind of rain on hot pavement, and suddenly you're 9 years old again, fully, viscerally, with no warning. That's not poetry, that's wiring. Smell has a direct line to the oldest software running in your skull, and our ancestors were running that software all the time. And the hardware behind it is bigger than you'd think. In 2004, two scientists, Linda Buck and Richard Axel, won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for working out how it functions. They found that the human genome devotes around 400 working genes purely to building odor receptors, more than we give to almost anything else our bodies do. 400 different keys, each waiting for its molecule to come along and turn it. That is not the equipment of a creature that stopped caring about smell. That is an enormous, expensive, lovingly maintained machine sitting mostly idle behind your face. Because here's what your nose can actually do, and it is genuinely insane. For years, scientists confidently repeated that humans could distinguish about 10,000 different smells. A nice, round number. Everyone believed it. Then in 2014, a team led by researchers at Rockefeller University, including Andreas Keller and Leslie Vaushall, published a study in the journal Science that blew that number up. Their estimate? Humans can potentially discriminate more than 1 trillion distinct olfactory stimuli. 1 trillion. We spent decades thinking we were nose-blind apes, and it turns out you are walking around with a chemical detection instrument so sensitive that we still can't fully measure it. You're not bad at smelling. You're just out of practice. So now hold that thought. You have an ancient sense wired directly into emotion and memory, capable of detecting a trillion variations. And you point it at another human being. What do you actually learn? The answer is almost everything. And this is where we go from biology to identity. Because a person's scent is not random. It is a chemical signature, and it is leaking information about them constantly. Their diet, their health, their stress levels, whether they're sick, whether they're afraid, roughly where they've been, what they've eaten, and on a deeper level than any of that, their genes. Let me give you the study that proves it, because it's one of the best in all of behavioral science. In 1995, a Swiss biologist named Klaus Wedekind, then at the University of Bern, ran what is now famous as the sweaty t-shirt experiment. He had a group of men wear the same plain cotton t-shirt for 2 nights straight. No deodorant, no cologne, no scented soap, just them marinating. Then he took those shirts, put them in boxes, and had women come in and smell them and rate which ones they found most attractive. The results were not random. The women, on average, preferred the smell of men whose immune system genes, specifically a cluster called the major histocompatibility complex, the MAKE, were the most different from their own. Read that again. They were sniffing t-shirts in a lab and unconsciously selecting for genetic compatibility. The reason that matters? Children of parents with different immune genes tend to have broader, stronger immune systems. So your nose, with no conscious input from you whatsoever, was helping pick a mate who'd give your offspring a better shot at not dying. That's not a metaphor. That's natural selection, running on smell. So when an ancient human leaned in and breathed you in, they weren't being quaint. They were reading you. They were running a background check that no handshake could ever provide. A handshake tells you a person has a hand. A smell tells you who they are. Now let's talk about the babies, because this is where the greeting really starts to make sense, and where it stops being a custom and starts being an instinct. The first relationship every single human being on Earth has ever had was built on smell. Before you could see clearly, before you understood a single word, before you knew you were a person, you knew your mother by her smell. Newborns, within days of birth, can recognize and orient toward the scent of their own mother over a stranger. And it goes both ways. Mothers, in study after study, can reliably identify their own infant purely by smell, often after just a few hours of contact, sometimes by sniffing nothing more than a worn baby shirt. So the very first language you ever spoke was chemical. The original bonding, the original I know you, you're mine, you're safe, happened through the nose. Mother and child, breathing each other in the dark, before a single word had ever been said between them. Is it really so strange, then, that across the world, humans turned that exact gesture, the lean in, the inhale, into a way of saying, I know you, I welcome you, you're safe here? The greeting smell isn't an invention. It's a leftover. It's the bonding ritual we were all born performing, scaled up to the whole community. And once you see it that way, you start finding it everywhere, which brings us out of the lab and into the human record. So now let's go to the map. Let's go to the Arctic first, because this is the one you've already heard of, even if you've heard it wrong. You know the Eskimo kiss, the thing in cartoons where 2 people rub their noses together side to side. That is almost entirely a Western invention, a Hollywood softening. The real gesture, practiced among Inuit and other Arctic peoples, is called a kunik. And a kunik is not a nose rub. It's pressing your nose and upper lip against the cheek or forehead of someone you love, and breathing in. It's a smell. It's most often shared between family members, between a parent and a child, an expression of affection so close to that original mother and baby bond that it's almost the same gesture. The popular story that they did it because their lips would freeze together is a myth. They did it because it's intimate, because inhaling someone you love is one of the most natural things a human being can do. Now go to the opposite end of the earth, to New Zealand, to the Māori. Their traditional greeting is the Hongi. 2 people press their noses and foreheads together, and they breathe in at the same time. And the meaning here is breathtaking, literally, in Māori tradition, that shared breath is the exchange of the ha, the breath of life. When you Hongi, you are no longer a visitor, a menahiri, a stranger from outside. By sharing breath, you become tangata wenwa, one of the people of the land. You have been mingled in a single inhale into the community. That's not small talk. That's a chemical and spiritual handshake that says we are now, in some real sense, the same air. Keep going. In parts of India, in Southeast Asia, in the Pacific Islands, in Polynesia, in parts of the Middle East and Africa, anthropologists and travelers have documented versions of the same thing. The sniff kiss, a greeting where you press your face close and inhale against the cheek or the neck. In several languages, this is so fundamental that the word for kiss and the word for smell are tangled together, sometimes literally the same word. Think about that. In some corners of human language, to kiss someone is to smell them. The two ideas never separated, because they were never really different. And this isn't just a modern observation. Go back to the ancient writers. Charles Darwin himself, in his 1871 book, The Descent of Man, took the time to note that in many parts of the world, people greeted one another not by kissing in the European sense, but by rubbing or pressing noses and smelling. He saw it as a window into something older. And he was right. What he was looking at was not a collection of unrelated local quirks. He was looking at the scattered survivors of a single, far older human behavior. The same gesture, born in the same place, sense, the nose, showing up on every inhabited continent because it never had to be invented anywhere. It came pre-installed. So now we have to ask the harder question, the one this whole video has been circling. If the smell greeting is this old, this deep, this universal, this biologically sensible, then why don't you do it? Why, when you walk into a room today, do you stick out a hand or wave or give an awkward little nod instead of leaning in to breathe a person in? What happened to the nose? And the answer, honestly, is a little dark, because we didn't lose the smell greeting by accident. We pushed it away on purpose, and it took thousands of years. Let's talk about that. The first thing that happened was cities. For the overwhelming majority of human history, you lived your entire life among maybe a few dozen to a couple hundred people. People you knew, people you were related to, people whose smell was familiar and safe, like a mother's to a child. Smelling a person made sense, because everyone you smelled was, in some sense, yours. But then we crammed ourselves into villages, then towns, then cities of thousands, and then millions of total strangers. And suddenly, the nose was overwhelmed. You can't intimately breathe in everyone you pass on a crowded street. The math breaks. The greeting that worked beautifully in a small band of kin becomes impossible, and frankly, unbearable, in a crowd of faces you will never see again. The second thing that happened was disease, and the idea of disease. For most of history, people believed sickness traveled through bad air, foul smells, what they called miasma. If you thought illness rode on stink, then leaning in to inhale a stranger's breath went from being warm to being terrifying. You didn't want their air in your lungs. You wanted distance. The handshake, the bow, the wave. These are greetings of distance. They let you acknowledge another person while keeping their air and their germs at arm's length. And after centuries of plague, of epidemics sweeping through those new crowded cities, of whole streets emptied and doors marked and the dead carried out at dawn, distance started to feel a lot like safety. And the third thing, the quietest and maybe the most powerful, was shame. As societies grew more layered, more hierarchical, more obsessed with refinement and class, the body itself became something to manage, to mask, to be slightly embarrassed by. The natural smell of a human being stopped being information and started being an offense. We invented soap, then perfume, then deodorant, then an entire global industry whose entire purpose is to make sure that you never, ever smell like a person again. Walk down any store aisle. Shelves and shelves of bottles and sprays and sticks lit up bright, engineered to erase the exact signal your ancestors used to recognize, to bond, to choose a mate, to say hello. We didn't just stop smelling each other. We made it so there was nothing left to smell. And so the nose retired. The greeting that was older than language got quietly replaced by a hand, and we told ourselves the hand was more civilized. But here's the twist. Here's the part that turns this whole story back on itself. You never actually stopped. Not really. Because there's a study, and it is one of my favorites in all of science, and it proves that the ancient smell greeting is still happening right now. today in offices and boardrooms and airports, in secret, without anyone admitting it. In 2015, a team of researchers at the Weizmann Institute of Science in Israel, led by the olfaction scientist Noam Sobel, published work in the journal eLife on what people actually do after they shake hands. They filmed hundreds of people greeting a stranger with a handshake. Then they watched what those hands did next. And what they found is genuinely remarkable. After shaking hands with someone, people significantly increased how often they touched their own face and brought that hand up near their nose. They were sniffing their hands, sampling the chemical residue of the person they just met, doing it without realizing it, doing it while consciously believing the handshake had nothing to do with smell at all. Sit with that. We built the handshake, in part, to avoid putting our faces near a stranger, and then we used the handshake to secretly smuggle that stranger's smell back to our nose anyway. The greeting changed shape. The instinct did not. You are, right now, still that ancient human leaning in to breathe someone in. You've just gotten sneaky about it. You shake a hand, and a few seconds later, you touch your face, and the oldest sense you own quietly runs its trillion variation analysis on the person across from you. And you never even notice. The nose never left. It just went undercover. So when you ask why ancient humans greeted by smelling each other, the real answer is that they weren't doing something strange. They were doing the most natural thing a human can do. They were using the oldest sense, wired straight into memory and emotion, the same sense that first told a newborn who its mother was, to answer the most important question one human can ask of another. Are you safe? Are you healthy? Are you kin? Are you one of us? And the modern world, with its cities and its plagues and its perfume aisles, spent thousands of years teaching us to be ashamed of the one tool that could answer it honestly. But the tool's still there, behind your eyes, older than your language, older than your name, running quietly every time someone leans in close. And here's where it gets stranger, because there's one last piece of this story that almost nobody talks about. We've covered the babies, the t-shirts, the hongi, the secret handshake sniff, but none of that explains the thing scientists are only now starting to take seriously. The idea that humans might be doing more than just reading each other through smell. The idea that we might be talking to each other through it, sending signals, fear, calm, even, possibly, attraction, without a single word, without a single conscious thought, molecule to molecule, brain to brain. A whole hidden conversation that has been running underneath every greeting in human history, including the ones you had today. And the evidence for that, the part of this story most people have never heard, is where things get truly hard to believe.